Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Apologia Center. Recently, Jordan Peterson had Dr. Lawrence Krauss on his podcast, and Lawrence Krauss and Jordan Peterson went on to make a couple of comments about religion in general and Christianity in specific. And so I want to address a couple of those points because I think there's some misunderstandings and misconceptions. So without further ado, let's let them speak for themselves.
I think the reason that there has to be a religious domain is because religious questions will never go away. And so even if you get rid of the answers, you can't get rid of the questions.
But you never want to get rid of the questions. I would argue that is that's my big argument about everything, is that we have to encourage questioning. In fact, that's what education should be based on. It should be based on answers. It should be based on questions. So I don't think I have no desire to get rid of those questions. Like, why, if you want to call it, why are we here?
Yes.
I would argue the why questions ultimately, however, the difference may be, and I know Richard has gotten involved in this too, because he wrote the foreword for one of my books, but the why questions are really all how questions. They only remain why questions if you believe there's some fundamental purpose. And since there's no evidence of that, ultimately, when you ask why are we here, it really means how are we here? When you ask why does your heart pump blood, it doesn't mean that there's someone made up. It means what are the biochemical processes by which your heart allows your body to exist.
All right.
Lawrence Krauss makes a very simple mistake here, specifically when he confuses the how question with the why question. He says that when people ask why, what they really mean is how. And he goes on to give us the example of the heart pumping blood. This falls apart when we bring up other examples. When a painter paints a painting and we say, why did the painter paint the painting? And you go on to tell us the mechanics of how the painting came to be, like he took some paint, he took a canvas, he mixed the paint, he got a specific color, and then he put the brush on the canvas. You get the point. That tells us absolutely nothing about why the painter painted the painting. The why question in a situation like that could be that the painter felt a great deal of joy or a great deal of suffering, and therefore from that produced this wonderful work of art. See, the mechanics of it don't even come remotely close to answering the why question when it's about purpose. And that's the sort of question people are asking when they ask the question of, why do we exist? Why are we here? We're going to let Dr. Krauss tell us what other problems he has with Christianity.
My problem with Christianity, and I've said this, I've debated once at Yale many years ago, theology, and I've argued that, and I've argued with theologians. I've said, give me an example in the last 400 years of a contribution of theology to knowledge. And you know what they all say? What do you mean by knowledge?
This is a very good question. And as far as I remember, Dr. Krauss asked this question to William Lane Craig. So I'm going to let Dr. Craig answer this one.
I'll try to be succinct.
And then we will go to the questions from the floor.
Theology students from Germany often wrestled with the question, is theology a Wissenschaft? That is to say, that's the word for science in German. But what they meant by science was, in the classical sense, scientia, knowledge. And certainly theology is a source of knowledge. It gives us knowledge of God, his existence and nature, what he requires of us, what our moral obligations are to him, how to find eternal life and forgiveness of sins. These, you may not be interested in this, but that doesn't do anything to deny the fact that theology is a scientia. It is a body of truth. It is a body of knowledge, just as much as science is scientia about the natural world.
Thank you, Dr. Craig, for that wonderful answer. Let's go on to see what Dr. Krauss has to say now.
Yes, but my problem with Christianity is it stopped asking questions. It stopped being an investigation, and it was a dictum. Here's the answer.
Yes.
Don't ask any more questions, and that is the antithesis of what I exist for. So I think that's probably.
Look.
Is it really true that Christianity teaches people to stop asking questions, to inquire, to question, to go into the deeper facts of life and existence and purpose? And the facts are that it's not. All throughout history, Christians have continued and pursued to ask questions. Now, some of those have been theological questions. Some of those have been philosophical questions. Some of those have been scientific questions. As a matter of fact, I would argue that not only has Christianity encouraged people to ask questions, but it's actually provided the worldview in which for people to ask those questions in. There are many assumptions that we make that you would have to base it on a Christian worldview, or at least a theistic worldview. One of those would be that God has created the world with design, or that there is order in the world. With this kind of an assumption, you can actually go into the laboratory and do your experimentation believing the world has a certain order to it, that things aren't going to randomly start happening or change. There are laws and functions to things. It's within a Christian worldview, within a Christian bubble, that the sciences flourished in Western Europe. A really good question to ask is this: why is it the case that the sciences did not flourish in other parts of the world, but they predominantly flourished within the Christian European context? One of the questions that comes up as well during this discussion is whether dogma, or a strong belief in something, say God, is somehow going to stop you from asking further questions. You're just kind of going to say, I know the answer to this, therefore I'm not going to ask any more questions. Let's hear the discussion on this.
Because I think what you're objecting to, correct me again if I'm wrong, but it's the same thing that you object to as a scientist. You object to dogma as de facto dogma.
Absolutely.
Okay, but
everything is up subject to question. Nothing is sacred.
Right. So that's the continued investigation of the creative mind.
Yeah.
So now, but that can't be quite right either, though, because when you move forward, you always move forward on the basis of dogma, but you question it. Like you do both at the same time, which is what you said people should be doing at the beginning, because you do assume the validity of your knowledge to move forward until you hit an impediment, and then you question it.
You have to make assumptions to move forward. The difference between science and religion is you can recognize later that those assumptions are wrong. And that's the beauty. That's what, to me, the distinction between science and religion.
There are three things that we must address here. Number one, is nothing really sacred, and is everything up for question? Number two, what are those assumptions that we make that we have to make in order to move on with our inquiries? And number three, is there a real difference between religion and science in the self-correcting kind of sense? So we'll address number one. Is everything up for grabs? Is everything up for questioning? Yes. But to say there's nothing sacred, like nothing you can touch in your inquiry, meaning you have to question everything, isn't as clear as we might like to think. And I think Jordan Peterson figures this out and says, wait, hang on here. You have to assume a bunch of stuff in order for your inquiry to continue, and then you got to address both of those things. And Lawrence Krauss, to his credit, says, yes, that's the case. We have to presuppose things, or we have to assume things in order to continue. But the assumptions there aren't just like very simple assumptions. They're major assumptions. For example, one of them being that I actually believe the external world exists, or that I can't experiment on little babies for fun, right? There's a morality aspect to this. So there are huge assumptions we make, and those assumptions cannot in any way be proven by science, meaning taken into the lab and studied upon. Those are philosophical and sometimes religious assumptions that we have to make. And the final point is this, that science is somehow self-correcting and religion is not. That's just not the case. When you actually study the religious texts, the religious inquiries throughout the centuries, plenty of religious people, specifically Christians, have self-corrected. For example, I might have a view of Jesus, and then by studying and reading the Bible, by inquiring of the Bible and what it teaches about Jesus, I correct my view about Jesus. So religion, specifically Christianity, is self-correcting. Again, it seems to me that Dr. Krauss is confusing some categories here. He's assuming we make the sort of inquiries in our religious studies, in our Christian studies, the same way we make inquiries in a laboratory when we're doing the science. Okay? And that's just not the case, because we're studying two different things, and the inquiries are different, but nonetheless, it actually is a self-correcting mechanism. And we can do that. Thank you guys for watching this. And the links for the videos, the interview with Lawrence Krauss and Jordan Peterson is in the description box. And the debate between William Lane Craig and Lawrence Krauss is also in the description box. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe, please like, and hit that little bell notification so that you will be notified when I go live or when we share more videos. Take care. God bless you guys and have a good day.